welcome to the Badass Breastfeeding Podcast. It's Dianne, your lactation consultant.
And I'm Abby, the Badass Breastfeeder, and today's episode is brought to you by Amara Organic Foods. They make organic, non-GMO baby food powders without the repeated high heat processes of traditional baby food. And we will hear more from Amara later, but you can head to badassbreastfeedingpodcast.com and check out our sponsor page if you ever need anything, because they make this podcast possible. And while you're there, you can scroll down and enter your email address and we'll send you episodes straight to your inbox every week. And now Dianne has our review of the week.
And it came to us via email at Dianne. Oh, not at that one. I'm sorry. badassbreastfeedingpodcast@gmail.com. And you could also leave them on iTunes, which is super helpful. So if you can do it that way, that's great. Because that helps the podcast. So that's really helpful for us. But this came from a listener and there was a question involved here. So I thought that was really good because it is something that we hear all the time. My little one is 6 months old and we are exclusively breastfeeding. She also says she listens to us regularly and it's her favorite thing about Mondays. So I totally appreciate that so much. I do pump while I'm at work and he takes a bottle while at daycare. I have loved our breastfeeding journey. We had a great LC at the hospital and have done great with latching and milk production. My only wonder is, can I increase the fat in my breast milk? My little boy is, well, little. I know how percentiles work and we are on the lower end around 7%. Granted, I'm 5'2" and my husband is 5'8", but is it impossible to increase the fat? And if so, how? Thank you. Love, a very avid listener. And my response to her, I did ask her if we could, use this question because it does come up a lot. And bottom line, I sent her a couple links to kind of explain a little bit. And we do have an episode on this in case anybody wants to hear more. I can link it in the show notes. No, your milk is your milk. There's no and I did hear this come up recently too, where somebody said, I wonder if the pediatrician said, maybe I just have skim milk. I'm saving that for a Miss episode, by the way. And no,
skim milk
is not a thing. That is not a
vanilla,
thing.
And my friend has unsweetened.
I have strawberry milk.
Yeah.
It just, there is fat in your milk. There's fat in your milk. It really doesn't matter. You can change up feeding. Sometimes some things you can do with feeding, but there is not a way to be if I eat this fatty food, it's going to increase the fat in my milk. That is not a thing.
No, your body knows how much fat to put in your milk.
Right.
That's the amount that's supposed to be there. And sometimes there's more in other people's milk because that baby needs more.
It's just,
your milk is made specifically for your baby, not for someone else's baby.
We need to trust how our baby is growing. And that is something that we don't do. We don't trust how the baby grows. But when babies, this is a really important thing to remember, when babies are exclusively getting breast milk, they grow the way they're supposed to grow. They grow the way their body is supposed to grow. And you have to look at the whole thing. And that's another thing I told her too. Is your baby meeting milestones? Are they doing well? They're pooping and peeing well. We know, all of that stuff is important. We can't just look at the baby and go, oh, they're 7th percentile. We need to increase their fat in the milk because they need to be the 50th percentile. Well, why? Why? Especially when you have parents that might be a little bit smaller, or they have other kids in the family that are smaller.
Or the baby's been in the same percentile the whole time. And it's well, we need to get them into a higher percentile. What? That's not what percentiles are for.
It's just, and
the
people
whole thing should be burned down. We need to burn the whole thing down.
It should be. Stupid. But trust the fact that your body is making the milk that your baby needs. And the other thing that happens too sometimes is that we run into situations where babies, and this is a 6-month-old baby, nobody knows what to do with a baby that's 6 months and exclusively breastfeeding because we don't see it that much. So in the office where your baby is being seen, the pediatric or the primary care, wherever you take your baby to be seen, they might not have a ton of experience with babies who are over 6 months and exclusively breastfeeding. They might not know what their growth pattern is supposed to be like. And that is a problem because we don't see it in this country that much. We just don't. People go back to work at 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks. A lot of times they end up starting on formula. Formula babies grow differently on formula. I know nobody wants to believe that, but it is the truth. There's a lot of research behind it. They grow a little bit differently when they're on formula. Breastfed babies, your baby is going to grow the way they're supposed to. It might not be as big and chunky and fat as society wants those babies to be, but it's just the way it is. I don't know what else to say. Kind of my bottom line.
Yeah,
that's
it.
Spiel on that. So what else can we talk about today? And thank you so much for sending that in, because like I said, that's a big question for everybody. Bottle
refusal.
That's a big thing too.
How freaking stressful is this?
Oh my
you have
God.
a baby, you get like a minute of maternity leave, and then you got to go back to work, and now you're trying to get ready to go back to work, and your baby won't take a bottle. I mean, how much stress can you put on one family? So what do people do? You hear like, well, you just, they'll eat if they're hungry. Don't worry, they'll get hungry enough. They'll do it.
Because your baby's manipulating you and they're holding up. Right. I did have a mom. Oh my gosh, this poor mom. She's so cute. I deal with this all the time. People talk about this all the time. People will message us about this. We'll get questions about it. Like, I see it a lot. And I talked to a mom recently. The baby was really struggling to take a bottle. And she said, if I'm trying to give her a bottle and it's not working, or she only can take a little bit of it and is, refusing, is it bad if I just go ahead and breastfeed her? Will she the way she put it, I can't remember exactly how she put it, but the bottom line was, is she going to link that to, I can just fuss while she's trying to give me the bottle, and if I put up enough of a fuss, I'll just get breastfed.
Oh, that's manipulating.
Right.
Which they don't know how to
do. No. And I'm like, no, that's not, no, your baby's not doing that. What the other thing that people don't understand either is, like, if your baby is not taking a bottle, if your baby is refusing a bottle, they're not taking it, they're crying, they're gagging, they're, doing all the things, they're, not sucking on it, whatever, that's probably because they physically cannot take a bottle. Like, that probably is what's happening. That's been my experience. They're not like, I'm refusing because I just want to be breastfed and that's it. Like, your 2-month-old baby doesn't know how to do that. That's manipulation beyond their scope of knowing what to do. Like, right. They're not manipulating you. They're really not. It's likely that they're really struggling to figure out what they're supposed to be doing with that bottle. Bottle feeding is very, very different than breastfeeding. It is very different. So, which that is another thing that people don't understand. And we did an episode not that long ago. Every time I say not that long ago, I look and it's been like 3 years, about how bottles different from breastfeeding. Didn't we recently?
Oh yeah, that was not that long ago.
Yeah. And it really is different. It really is different. Babies really need to suck and swallow very differently than they do when they are breastfeeding. So sometimes that's hard for them to figure out on the fly really quickly as milk is flowing into their face. So, like, so they will choke and gag. I had this one mom. Oh my God, she was hilarious. This is like years ago, but I'll never forget. She was like, I was like, well, what happens when you try? She goes, she acts like she's gagging. I'm like, she's really gagging.
Oh my God. She acts like what an actress. Oh my God.
She's like, she acts like she's gagging. Like, look at her. Cause the baby was like the whole time. I'm like, she really is.
Faker.
I know. I'm like, but she really is gagging. Like, that is really what's happening. It is really hard for some babies. It was really, it was funny, but it's really hard for babies sometimes. Now, the other thing that's confusing that I do see happen a lot. So if you've experienced this, don't feel like you were crazy. Baby will take a bottle in like their first week or so of life. And then, maybe like, baby was having a hard time breastfeeding, or latching wasn't good, or they were separated from their parent, or whatever happened. And the baby needed to have a bottle in the beginning. And then they cut that out. I was like, I stopped it. We didn't need it anymore. We didn't need to supplement anymore. And the baby's only been breastfeeding for the last 2.5 months. Now getting ready to go back to work, trying to give a bottle, and the baby won't do it. I don't understand. They did it fine in the beginning. Right. But now they've been breastfeeding and now they can't figure out how to go back and forth. And that is likely a baby that maybe has a little bit of a coordination problem. Doesn't mean that they're going to be like, and parents always laugh when I say babies are uncoordinated, because it's like, I'm not talking about like, playing a musical instrument or being able to like play sports or something like that. Like they're just not coordinated. They're just not figuring out what they need to do with that suck and swallow and, making it work with this bottle. And for some babies, that can be really difficult. So it's not like they're trying to like make you stay home, so that you can't leave the house.
That'd be funny. Yeah.
But that was this, and this is something too, like I had this mom recently where really struggling because, breastfeeding was painful and baby wanted to nurse all the time. And he just wanted to be with mom all the time and just wanted to nurse. And, her partner and her in-laws and everybody were like, just give the baby a bottle at night so you can sleep and blah, blah, blah. Just let, her husband give a bottle, whatever, and just do this and that. But he wouldn't take a bottle. And they kept telling her over and over again, just give him a bottle. Just give him a bottle. But he wouldn't take one. And it's like, what? And I kept saying to her, like, what do they want you to do? He's not taking a bottle. They're like, just switch him to formula. This is too much for you. I'm like, but he won't take a bottle. So what do they want you to do? Like, it's just be supportive.
Why is telling people to quit like the only way we can figure out how to support people?
I mean, it's just insane.
Quit. And it's never, ever that way with anything else.
No, it's not.
But with breastfeeding, just quit.
And it's like, and that's... But how are you supposed to even do that when they won't, when bottle feeding is
they won't take a bottle. Right.
And, somebody was like, oh, baby never took a bottle. They're super stubborn. And it's like, probably that's not it. Sometimes the things that you can do, like there are some little things that you can do, and sometimes it does take some time to figure out. So, and we're going to go into all that stuff. But the bottom line is I really do think that if you are somebody that has to go back to work, and this is going to be something and bottles are going to be a huge part of your breastfeeding relationship, which it is for a zillion people. Like we want to make sure that things are working before you go back to work, obviously, because this is really stressful. And if you're getting close to going back to work, we want to make sure that this is working. And I can't tell you the amount of times I've had people call me and be like, baby won't take a bottle. I'm going back to work next week.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And this comes because people say, baby won't breastfeed anymore if you give him a bottle. So don't give him a bottle before this specific age.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's not true either. That is not true either. There's so much ridiculous information out there that nobody even knows what to listen to. But there's so much, oh my God, there's nipple confusion. So don't give them a bottle until it's absolutely necessary. And then you have parents that are like so freaked out that their baby is never going to breastfeed again if you give them a bottle.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah.
That they don't give a bottle to the very last second. And then they realize the baby is struggling to figure that out. Like it's so hard to be a parent in this environment and around the internet where you have all this information that is so confusing and conflicting.
Seriously. So what do we do? When should we start practicing?
I mean, I always tell parents, depending on when you go back, like if you're a parent that goes back to work at 6 weeks, you really want to start at like 3 weeks. You really do. I mean, you really want to start by like 2-3 weeks. Just seeing, and that doesn't mean you have to give this baby a bottle every day, but every couple days, maybe just to make sure that the baby's taking it okay and that they're, acclimating to it and that they're figuring it out. That is, that's an important piece too. So starting them slow, starting them gradually. If you have this baby that like takes it fine and that's fine, then great. But if you are kind of struggling with it, usually the first thing we start to do is look at the bottle itself, right? Like, well, which bottle is best? I mean, there's a million bottles out there and every single one of them says that they're the best for the breastfeeding baby.
Right.
I mean, that's a marketing
which is
gimmick.
Against the WHO code of marketing, but
it is.
That's besides the point.
But sometimes
it's all a bunch of crap, though.
It is. Yeah, it is a bunch of crap. Sometimes it just depends on the shape of the bottle, the shape of the nipple. something maybe that looks more like your nipple might be better off for your baby. Some babies do better with a wider base. Some babies do better with a shorter base. It just really depends on your baby. So sometimes you do have to try a few different things, try a few different bottles to find one that your baby is more comfortable with. Some people swear by very specific bottles. And it has always been my experience that it's not necessarily the shape of the bottle, but it's the baby and how they're able to take that bottle. One of the other things that is said a lot is don't let the mom give the bottle. We hear that all the time. Don't let the mom give the bottle because then the baby's going to, think that that's, but no.
That they can just manipulate. And they can smell her weakness. They can smell the boob and the weakness in this one. And then they'll get it out of you.
And that's a load of crap as well. I have had plenty of parents and also talked to feeding, speech pathologists who work very, very closely with babies who don't take bottles, say that the mother is actually the person that should be giving the bottle if it's a situation where baby's not taking it well. And that is because feeding is a trust issue. It's a very intimate trust issue that baby has only been doing with their mom. And now you're going to pass the baby off to a stranger and feed them? Some babies are like, I don't know who you are and what you're doing to me right now.
Right. Like I'm already uncomfortable because who are you?
Right.
And then he was trying to shove this thing in my mouth.
Right. It's a trust issue. Feeding is it's connected to trust and security and safety. So it might come better from the mother. And there'll be some times where I've had parents who have, tried all these different things to get their baby to take a bottle before they contact us for help. And they'll be like, well, I've tried to give it. I've had dad try to give it. I had my mom try to give it. I've had the babysitter try to give it, whatever. And be like, who did the best? Oh, well, the baby took it the best from me. I'm not surprised because it's a trust issue. So we want the baby to be comfortable if they're having a hard time doing this. So it might be the mom that needs to try to give the bottle first. And then as baby gets more comfortable, then you can have other people do it. But if you're struggling to get the baby to take one at all, I would say definitely have mom try to give it. Should we do our ad and then we're going to talk about other tips?
Absolutely.
All righty.
We'll be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by Amara Organic Foods. We've all heard baby food pouches and jars are overly processed, low in nutrition, and high in sugar. But fresh delivery options are so expensive. That's why we love Amara. They make organic, non-GMO baby food powders without the repeated high heat processes of traditional baby food. All you need to do is add water or breast milk, mix, and voila. You have a freshly made puree with the tastes, textures, and most importantly, the nutrients like you just made it from scratch. My kiddos are not babies, but they can tell you that they are yummy treats with real flavors. These mixes are a very simple and fast way to prepare treats for your nurslings as they begin to start solid foods. Try favorites like sweet potato raspberry, kale veggie mash, or oats and berries. Check out their baby food super powders and plant-based yogurt melts at amaraorganicfoods.com. That's Amara, AMARA Organic Foods, and use code BADASS for 20% off of your first order. And our sponsors and their promo codes can be found in our show notes under this episode at badassbreastfeedingpodcast.com. Our show notes will also include further information about things we talk about in this episode. And also at badassbreastfeedingpodcast.com, you will find our breastfeeding resources, all of our other episodes, and information about scheduling your very own one-on-one online lactation consultation with Dianne.
So one of the things that I usually talk to about people when they're struggling with bottles is I'll ask them, like, what happens when you try to give it? Does the baby cry? Do they just, do they throw a fit? Do they gag? Do they take a little bit and then stop? Like what's happening with the bottle? If it's a situation where they're gagging, they're crying, they're hysterical, that is a baby that's definitely having a super hard time trying to figure out how to make that work. And that is really hard on parents, because you don't want to have to be fighting your baby or leave them with somebody else to fight your baby.
Yeah.
And that's usually a situation where they say, oh, if the baby, well, somebody will tell you if the baby's hungry enough, they'll take it.
Yeah.
No, they're not. No, that's not what happens. So this is a baby that's really kind of like, I physically can't do this. I don't understand what you're trying to make me do. And I just can't. I can't figure it out. I always, ask, does a baby suck on that, on the bottle? Are they able to suck on the bottle? And usually they'll say no. Often I'll ask if the baby has a pacifier. Usually that's a no too. No,
Yeah.
baby won't take a pacifier either. So if they can take a pacifier, then sometimes the pacifier that looks like the bottle will help. You know what I mean? Like if there's, a pacifier that your baby's taking, whatever the nipple looks like on that pacifier, maybe try a bottle that also looks like that, because that might be helpful too. Sometimes it's the position of the baby. Sometimes we need to alter the position of the baby. And what I learned, again, from a speech language pathologist that does a lot of this kind of stuff with babies who are struggling to take bottles, and from doing some of my own research, is that putting baby in a position where they're laying on their side. So what you would do with them is you put them in and I can link some info on this into the show notes, because it does work. Putting the baby on their side. So if you're sitting in a chair, put the baby in your lap on their side and put the bottle in, and you can do paced bottle feeding this way, which is absolutely what we recommend. And we've talked about paced bottle feeding a zillion times, but doing paced bottle feeding with your baby in this position. And the reason why this works.
Is this baby facing out or facing you?
They're on their side, so looking out, like kind of looking either to the left or to the right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So not facing up on their back, on their side, and you're holding the bottle on its in a horizontal position. And this is because this is kind of how they are laying when they're breastfeeding in your arms, right?
True.
Like, so we're putting them in that position, and in that position, they do not have to try to balance the weight of their head or, try to do any of those other things that can interrupt their coordination. So having them on their side and a little bit raised, like a little bit, like we want their head a little bit more above their behind their coolie. So their little cheeks, whatever you want to call them, their little butt. Have their head up a little bit. So a little bit of an incline on the baby as well. Putting them on their side and doing paced bottle feeding with that baby. And all that is, you can get them to suck a little bit. Sometimes I've had success with babies kind of putting them, like slipping the nipple into the side of their mouth and kind of rolling it over to their tongue so that they kind of start to suck on it a little bit. I've had some parents tell me that the baby's just chewing on the nipple, kind of getting milk out that way. And that is also a baby that's not sucking on a bottle. They cannot figure out how to get that suck on that bottle. So this can be a process. So maybe you can start that way. Maybe your baby will start to take a little bit. We need to stop. Maybe they'll start to get fussy, finish them at the breast. Try again another day. Be consistent. If you find a bottle that works, continue to use that bottle. Don't switch and go, oh, let's try a different one and see if this is better. Like, we need to stay with something and be consistent with it. If you're finding something that is starting to work or somewhat works, then do it that way. The other thing that you need to also wrap your head around, which can be really hard when you're leaving your baby with somebody else to take care of your baby, is that even if you can get your baby to take an ounce of milk out of that bottle, you might just need to feed them more frequently. So that caretaker might need to just feed your baby an ounce or an ounce and a half out of the bottle, whatever your baby's able to do, every hour. And I know you don't want to tell people to do that because you want to just be able to like give your baby 3 ounces and be done for, the next 3 hours. But that might not be what works for your baby, at least right now, until they're kind of getting used to it. It's just, we need to work with them.
Yeah, this is why you have to start before, because it takes a lot of practice.
Mm-hmm.
And learning how to use a bottle, because no one's going to show you how to do that either.
Right. They don't. They're just like, oh yeah, give your baby a bottle.
Right. We don't teach paced bottle feeding. And so people are just laying babies on their back and they're like, why are they Why are they acting like this?
They look like they're drowning.
Right.
Yeah, that's because they are, basically.
And you do want to always use a slow flow nipple.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, that's the one thing you want.
Always use a slow flow nipple with paste bottle feeding. And that will help to give your baby, especially if your baby's struggling to take a bottle. Oh my gosh, you don't want to be like, all right, I stuck it in there and they're finally taking it down. Let's just leave it there. No, we want your baby to be able to kind of deal with it. Okay. You know, we don't want them to feel overwhelmed. We want your baby to take it okay, to not feel overwhelmed with it, to be able to suck and swallow, coordinate that, take some breaks. This should not be a super fast process. It should be a slow process. It should take them a little while to take a bottle. It shouldn't be like 30 seconds and they're done. That's not what we're looking for here. So once they start to be able to do it, then, you know, paste bottle feeding is the way to go. Slow flow nipple paste bottle feeding.
And I feel like you need to, when you're practicing, you really need to like time it well, like not when they have just eaten, but also not when they're so hungry they're upset.
That's a great point.
Because they cannot do anything when they're upset.
Right. Right. If they are upset, maybe breastfeed them for a minute to try to calm them, get a little bit of milk into them so that they're not super overwhelmed. We know that skin to skin and breastfeeding really, really calms our babies down. So maybe doing that with them first if they're super fussy, or if they're just waking up from a nap and like ready to roll. It's been 3 hours since they've eaten. Maybe do a little bit of that first. When your baby kind of like gets a little bit of milk into them, then try. This is definitely a process. Like we keep saying, like this is a process and as your baby is getting better at it, then you can just kind of whip into it and give it. But sometimes it's just, you need to work with this process. You might need to only give a little bit and then by bottle, as much as your baby can tolerate. When they start getting fussy, then finish them off at the breast. That's another thing that you can do too. But if they are still really, really struggling to take it, they are not sucking well on it. They're not using a pacifier. They are not, it's really, really hard. You want to have that baby assessed by a lactation consultant for sure. Just to be sure, is there a tongue tie situation happening here that might have been overlooked at some point? Just because your baby breastfeeds well doesn't mean they're going to take a bottle well. If they're breastfeeding well with a tongue tie, doesn't mean they're going to be able to bottle feed well with a tongue tie. Like there's a lot of differences that happen here. So we want to be sure that there isn't anything like that was maybe overlooked. And that's why your baby's not taking a bottle well, because of that. Definitely like lactation consultants can help with this. And I've had people that contact me and they're like, is this something that you can help with? Just because we're lactation consultants doesn't mean we're going to be like, oh, well, you just shouldn't give a bottle anyway. Forget it. Don't go back to work ever in your life.
I know. That's the same with weaning too. It's like, I don't know if this is
with weaning too.
People even say like, I don't know if I'm allowed to ask this question. I don't know if I should be asking this. It's about weaning. It's like, well, I mean, like weaning is it's like all part of it.
Yeah. Weaning is part of it.
And certainly bottle feeding is part of it, because you have to go back to work if you want to continue to breastfeed. Or maybe you're not even going back to work. I mean, sometimes people bottle feed for all kinds of reasons. But it's part of it. Yes. And, you can go to the website and get Diane's info. Schedule a consultation with her. She'll help you.
We'll talk all about it. The other important thing is if you are attempting bottles and it's been kind of like this process, well, you'll try, baby's not really doing too much with it. You try the next day, maybe a little bit more, but not so much. Do not throw that milk away. I cannot stress that enough. If your baby has tried a bottle, you put an ounce or two in a bottle, your baby only took a couple of sips, don't throw it away. Do not throw that milk away. Save it. Excuse me. Try it again. Try the bottle again that day if you want to. There really is no limits like, okay, you can only try once a day. It doesn't have to be like that. You can try a couple times a day if you want to, if you're really, kind of struggling or you feel like maybe baby's starting to get it. Let's be a little bit more consistent with it. Your baby's not going to forget how to breastfeed. So please do not worry about that. If your baby's been breastfeeding all this time, they're not going to all of a sudden get a bottle and be like, this is way better. I like this better. That is not going to happen.
Because this is what happens too. People are like, oh, now they prefer the bottle.
And that's not true.
And that's the episode we have, right?
I don't
We
remember.
have,
Do we?
yes, here we.
I don't know what we have, people. But yeah, that's not, I'm a firm believer that that's not
Oh,
a thing.
I think it's just like how bottle feeding differs from breastfeeding.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And I'll link that too. But that doesn't happen. Your baby would much rather prefer to breastfeed, for many, 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 many reasons. So your baby is not all of a sudden going to get a couple bottles and be like, this is way better life for me. I choose this life. It's just not going to happen. Like I don't know how to make people understand that.
I had that taste. I had the taste of the bottle. Now they're chasing the dragon.
Dipped my foot into the bottle
I gotta
pool.
hold off until I get that bottle again. Oh,
like it doesn't work like that. And we just have such little faith in our babies.
Yeah. And ourselves. We think that they just don't want us. They're just like, oh, they don't want to breastfeed. They're rejecting me.
And then when they don't want a bottle, we're like, oh my God, they don't want a bottle feed. They're rejecting. It's like, it's so, I mean, if these damn babies could just be born and know exactly what to do all the time, you know, like just, such a pain in the ass.
And if we could just know what to do all the time.
We have no idea what we're doing. Mm-mm. And so sometimes I will, if it becomes a really difficult situation. I mean, I like to see these babies because I want to make sure, you know, how is their actual suck? Especially if you're a first-time mom, how do you know if your baby's suck isn't good? Like, you don't really know. Especially if your baby's breastfeeding fine, because a lot of times they can they can get them, like they'll breastfeed fine. But you might not realize that they're not, you know, doing well necessarily with it, and their suck is not very good. So then we go to bottle feed them, and it's like, oh, their suck really, like, we need to figure this out here because their suck is terrible. Or they're thrusting their tongue a lot, not able to accept the pacifier or the bottle nipple in, and they're just kind of thrusting and they're biting and they're pushing on it, and they're just like, what is this foreign thing in my mouth that you're trying to make me suck on? They just can't figure it out. Like they're not manipulating you. They just can't figure it out sometimes. Sometimes it will come to sending those babies to a speech language pathologist to kind of help you get them into a place where they're sucking well. It can be,
a lactation consultant can make that referral for you. Is that right?
Yeah, lactation consultant can do that for sure. Can be like, okay, this is something that's, you know, that we need to help your baby learn. You know, sometimes they just need to learn how to do it, and we need to help them. They're definitely going to
need to learn because this is not normal for them.
No, it's not.
We see bottles are so normal for us, but they are not normal to babies at all.
Mm-mm.
That is, they do not understand what that thing is. They understand instinctually what your nipple is, but you put that bottle in there, they don't know what to do with it.
They have no idea. And like I said, if you did not listen to that episode about how bottle feeding differs,
oh my God, I almost just like punched my microphone off the table. All I was trying to do was put my glasses on, and I ended up in a fist fight with my microphone.
If you have not listened to that episode yet about how bottle feeding differs from breastfeeding, and you're having a hard time getting your baby to take a bottle, and you just happened upon this episode, definitely go back and listen to that one, because there's a lot of really cool information about how what your baby needs to be able to coordinate in order to take a bottle. Like, some babies are really good at it, some babies not so much. And ironically, a lot of the babies that I come across that are struggling to take a bottle had some kind of breastfeeding issue in the beginning, or had something happening in the beginning and then mastered the breastfeeding. And then we go to give a bottle and they're like, can't make it work. Can't go back and forth. And it's very hard for them. So if you are worried, like if you're somebody right now that you're like pregnant and you're like, oh my gosh, my baby's going to have to take a bottle because I have to go back to work. Like, we hear you. That is a huge stressor for a lot of parents.
Yeah.
It is huge stressor. We can, work with it, and starting early is okay. If you want to start at 2 or 3 weeks, just to be sure, give a bottle every couple of days. You can do that. Like, you can do that. It's nice if you don't have to, but if you really feel like that will help you because you have to go back to work and you just want to make sure it's working for you, then you can do that. if your baby is older and you're trying to give a bottle, and when I say older, I mean like 4, 5, 6 months, and they're just kind of like not doing it. This is when you're first starting to try. Cause I've had some parents that are like, I wanted to go as long as I possibly could, not giving a bottle because I was afraid of nipple confusion. So then I tried when the baby was like 4 or 5 months. Babies' suck reflex is involuntary for the first 3 months of their life. So if you're trying to give a bottle at like 4, 5, 6 months, your baby has a little bit more control over whether or not they want to suck on that bottle. So this is kind of where if they're having a harder time figuring it out, you might have a harder time teaching them that too, because they're just kind of like got a little bit more control over it. So at that point, if babies are like 5, 6 months old, I would go to a cup, honestly. Like I wouldn't even bother with even trying a bottle at that age. I'd just go straight to a cup because you're going to have to anyway. And your baby might be way more acclimated to taking a cup than they would be to bottle feeding at that age. So you can absolutely do that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I would do. I wouldn't even try to be giving a 6-month-old a bottle.
No. I had somebody reach out to me about that recently, and she really, she said that they were, had trouble with the cup too. Did try that, but wasn't really like diligent about trying it. And the baby's 6 months and she's trying this bottle, and it's like, gave her a few things to try, but overall it's like, I would focus on a cup at that age. Honestly.
Yeah. I mean, maybe they take it easily and that's fine, but if they don't, then just move on.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth saying too, is that if you're not returning to work and you're not planning on spending time away from your baby, you don't have to go through this.
No. Don't
worry about pumping. Don't worry about whether your baby will take a bottle or not if you don't need to. Because so many people think that they have to. Because it's like, I can't pump. Well, why are you pumping? Well, I don't know. Freezer stash just in case. But like, if you don't have to. Pumping is not an automatic part of breastfeeding.
And people think it is. It's not.
Well, yeah. I mean, like if you get pregnant and have a baby shower, people will bring you a breast pump.
And bottles.
And it's like, well, yeah. It's like, well, wait a minute. Is this person need this? Does this person have to go back to, is this person going back to work? Is this person spending, significant hours away from baby? Because otherwise don't even bother.
And some people do it just so someone else can feed the baby.
Yeah. And is that what you want? Or is that what somebody's telling you to do?
Right. Because that's not always necessary. I mean, it can feel super overwhelming to be the only person that feeds this child.
Well, yeah. And that's fine if that's what you want to do. But if it's more overwhelming to like get up and pump and try to get the baby to take a bottle, then it's you just like do whatever is easiest. That's my answer. Do what's easiest for everything in life. Do what's easiest.
Honestly, I just couldn't be bothered. Like it just, that was me though, right? Like my first one, I don't know, he had maybe 5 bottles in his whole life. And that was really because my dad had a stroke when my first son was like, I don't know, not even 6 months old, probably. And I was at the hospital a lot. So I needed to leave a few bottles for him. And that was probably the only reason why he ever had bottles. The twins had bottles more because I did need a little bit more help. But even when I say more, it wasn't that much. It was more to do. Honestly, it's just more to do. And I was kind of like, I don't know, feeding was my job. I really like to be able to do that. And I would just kind of work my schedule around, not my schedule, but your babies get to a point where they can go a few hours between feeds.
Yeah.
If you're out, like if you want to go out to the store or whatever, if you're out for 2 hours or you're out for 3 hours, don't feel like you have to leave a bottle. Other people feel like that. Other people are like, oh my God, what if the baby needs to eat? It's like, she's not gone forever. Feed him before you go. Feed him when you come home. You can do, like, there's ways to get around leaving the house without your baby, without having to leave a bottle.
Right.
But people just get so freaked out about it. And it's like, it's okay. Like everything is going to work itself out. Sometimes we just need to, look at everything and be like, all right, what's happening here?
Yeah. Get help. You have to get help.
Yeah,
if there's a problem, you have to get help. You can't just be like at home going, I don't know what to do. Like, and just doing all these things and wasting money on buying,
a
all
zillion
kinds
bottles.
of crazy things. Yeah.
Like I've had people be like, I've probably spent $300 on buying different bottles and doing this and that. And, now it's a week before you go back to work and you're just reaching out for help. And it's like, if you're struggling with this, reach out sooner rather than later. It really is important. It's important for your sense of feeling okay with it. You don't want to walk around feeling super anxious because you had to send your baby to daycare, not taking a bottle and just hoping that somehow she's going to do it.
Oh my God, it's so scary.
I know. So I'll link a couple more episodes in because that could be really helpful info. I'll link stuff about the sideline breastfeeding because that's helpful as well. And good luck, but reach out if you're really struggling.
Yes.
For sure.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Bye.